they get the chance. They were born in bloody circumstance. To go, leave me, run like you've never run before. A voice from the underground, given room to breathe, not puppy drowned. So die if you get the chance. Better men than you've been, let this dance. To go, leave me, run like you've never run before. I have seen the worst, and there is nothing left for me to hate, so I can lay me down, my brothers, on the ground. I bled today until Coyote comes to raise me up and carries me away. To go, leave me, run like you never did. No, believe me, run like you've never run before.
Everybody, welcome to the Scottish Rugby podcast brought to you by the Scottish Rugby blog. I am Cammy Black. We've got probably a fairly short podcast tonight for the main podcast, but Patreons, don't worry, you're in for a treat with our Patreon special. Joining me this evening to catch up with some of the news that's been going on in the world of Scottish rugby, we have John Anderson. Good evening, John.
Good evening, Cammy. Well, so you managed to spit that out just about there. That was good.
Just about. The problem is what happened, John, as you know, because you joined me in the green room before we logged on. I've tried to down a decent bowl of chips. I mean, look, that's the size of what we're talking about.
It was a pretty decent goal. I watched you absolutely
You watched me
shuffling.
do it during the 3 minutes of the theme song. I can report I've got about 8 chips left in here, so I'm going to have to. Someone's going to have to monologue at some point so I can finish those bad boys before they go cold. Also joining us this evening, we have Jonny McGinty. Good evening, Jonny.
Good evening. I ate my dinner very early this week, so I'm all good.
You're fine. You're not wolfing it down just as you come on air. This is my second tea, to be fair.
Not like last week when I went back for seconds. Yeah, well, I went back for seconds of risotto last week.
We've also got Craig Manson with us as well. Craig, fresh in the door, Craig.
Yeah, just as yourself, just shoveling while we chat. So it was, unlike Jonny McGinty, I was at training tonight. So
briefly, apparently.
We start at 6:30 till 8. Don't worry about it. We're not the same as we start an hour earlier than you do.
Is that because it's the vets, Craig? Is that just because everyone has an earlier bedtime?
No. We just Perthshire. It's Perthshire senior men, so we start a little bit earlier than I'm used to. With my
We never
previous
expressly mentioned that Craig's. We never expressly said that Craig's a dirty turncoat traitor, did we? We should probably cover that.
So why have you left Tower 5 then, Craig?
I have left Tower Fife for the reason of development. I want to develop as a coach, and also they didn't have anything for me, so I was going to take a year out, and my wife and my son all expected me to take a year out, and then I got an opportunity to work with a couple of coaches that I know that are going to be fantastic. That will really develop me as a coach. So I had to take it with two hands,
There we go.
and then
I
deal
told
with all
Craig I
the
was going back
rubbish.
to the seniors at how, and then he decided he wasn't going to get involved.
Exactly.
Well, I thought if the
I,
standards was going to get that low.
I had someone got involved with the seniors at Howe, said, "I'll play if you need me," and then refused at the first opportunity. Jonny.
Oh,
I did not refuse.
No.
I've said I am available, but I am complaining loudly about it because what I said was, I'll sit on the bench for the occasional home game if you really need me. And then the first game of the season is on Saturday and it's away. And the coaches text me on Monday and said, "Are you available on Saturday?" That's not what I agreed to, but okay.
I'm just thinking, hang on a minute, I'll sit on the bench at the occasional home game. Is that not a bit like, sitting out waiting for I want everyone to watch me. Look, here I'm at home.
Oh, 100%.
We've played together for a long time.
Clearly at it.
I'm not a difference maker, let's be honest. I'm not going to win any games.
Excuse me, Johnny.
Is what I'm concerned about.
Excuse me, Johnny. If you go on the pitch when you're needed, you're a difference maker. Don't you tell yourself anything different.
Craig's clearly in coaching mode, isn't he?
Yeah. I mean, we talk a lot in rugby about painting a picture, and that's all Johnny's doing. He's painting a lovely picture of being present when everybody at the club can see him, rather than
absolutely.
Rather than a picture of when only the hardy souls that get on the bus can see him. So anyway, welcome to the podcast this evening. We've got a few bits and bobs of news to dodder through or sugar through. We'll come to that in a moment as we get through the podcast. We've had the training squad for the XV5s. So I've got that right. Yeah, XV5s, XV12s, XV5, XV2.
WXV.
I get a number with X's and V's.
WXV.
WXV. That's it. This is the WXV2. So the Scotland women's squad's been announced on the training squad. There's not many surprises. I mean, it's good to see the players that have been away with the sevens back. Craig, I think that the big thing for me was some of the players that kind of really shone during the Six Nations aren't on pro contracts yet, and that's surprising.
Yeah, it's especially when they said they were going to be, putting them in place, and how they were getting extra funding, and they've got this new sponsorship deal with a fossil fuel company, etc. You would have thought that there was going to be extra money around. Yeah, and also they've got the problem you have is that there were some significant new players coming through, and they made a huge difference to the squads. But then again, it may be that they have, and don't, far be it for me to criticise the SRU or not criticise the SRU. So it may be that you find that they've made the decision not to take the pro contracts yet. They may have been offered. You just don't know. As long as they're involved in the women's XV or the WXV or whatever you want to call it, as long as they're involved and they're getting game time, I'm happy. And then hopefully we'll see them onto their pro contracts. But we could probably also mention another surprise piece of news with the women's squad as well. But we can talk about that in a minute.
We'll come to that in a moment. I mean, I think Craig's got a fair point there, Johnny. I think that we don't know what has been offered and what's been turned. I can only assume that Francesca McGee has been offered so many contracts that she's taken 6 months out of the game to consider which one's the best way forward, because she was the big surprise name, I think, for me that hadn't got a pro contract. And you would think the way the Six Nations went, I mean, she's been talked of very highly in a lot of quarters, that probably the biggest name that hasn't got a pro contract yet, as far as we're aware.
Yeah, that did kind of take me by surprise. But I think Craig's probably spot on. It's a lot of players with a lot of options, and she is very much top of the list. So I wouldn't necessarily say that just because she's not on one of the SRU Pro Central contracts that her rugby career isn't progressing very well. But it is a bit of an eyebrow raise that she's not involved with the SRU system, I would say.
Craig alluded to some of the news there, John. But Matt Banahan has been appointed the attack coach for Scotland Women, which is a high-profile name. All right. Now, Matt Banahan, is, as far as I know and from what I can tell, has been doing a lot of academy work and has coaching experience. My reservation with this is it's a big name appointment. I don't know what his pedigree is.
Yep.
But it feels like you would be, I guess, you'd be taken aback if that appointment was made in the men's game, I guess. And I think there's a wider conversation we may get on to. There's been some debate on Twitter this week about capitalism and women's rugby. But it's, on the one hand, it's a named appointment. On the other hand, I don't know what experience he has because he's not long out the game.
Yeah, right. So let's backtrack that. Yes, it's a named appointment in that he has a pedigree in professional rugby. He was a professional rugby player. One of fairly, it was fairly well regarded as an international. For me, this appointment from Matt Banahan's side is a brilliant appointment because all it is him putting an international name on his CV before he moves into the men's game. For the women's game, it is back to exactly what we've discussed 100 times in this podcast about coaches. The women's game don't want coaches who just want to better their CV so they can get a men's gig. You're absolutely right. Matt Banahan wouldn't have got a gig at Scotland International men's team. He wouldn't have got a gig at the English team. Well, he might have actually based in how shambolic they are at the moment. But, the fact is he doesn't have any pedigree other than some academy work. So why is he being handed the reins to an international attack? Conversely, Gregor Townsend was in a very similar position when he was handed the reins to the Scotland attack back in the day. So is it a Scottish thing that we just take a punt on people that maybe, up and coming coaches that maybe show a wee bit of potential? Potentially, maybe that's our thing. But I think from Banahan's perspective, this is literally a tick box. If he's there in 2 years' time, you can absolutely call me anything. I will literally eat whatever you want. Name your price. In 2 years' time, if he's still in the Scotland women's attack coach job, I will eat anything.
I'm aware it's massively unlikely,
that,
right? But I don't think we can say for sure that Matt Banahan just wants to be a men's coach. Like, maybe he does want to be a women's coach. We don't know that. I think it's very unlikely, but you never know.
That's a fair point, Johnny. Thank you for the voice that Johnny McGinty there, the voice of reason on the podcast.
Come back in 2 years when I'm right, and we'll talk.
We'll see. I mean, Craig, it is. I mean, he could have impressed the interview. He maybe does have some good skills, some good potential, something that Brian Easton's looking for and is excited to work with. But it feels. I don't know. It feels like where are the women coaches in Scotland coming from? There are some high-profile women coaches that are coaching from Scotland who are coaching overseas, and have that experience. I don't understand where the Matt Banahan appointment has come from, and I don't. But at the same time, you've got someone new, a young coach coming in who can bring exciting new ideas to the game. Why not take the opportunity? I suppose as a team.
I think, you've basically answered my points that I was going to say, Cammy. I think it's a two-edged sword. It's one. It's great to have someone who is very, very, very recently retired, so he's been involved in the professional game for a long time. He can give a huge amount of advice to everyone's involved in the squad. He can work with them. They can gain from his experience. And I'm always complaining that we don't involve younger players who have just retired into whether it's refereeing or whether it's coaching, etc., as much as maybe I would like to see. On the other side, I was having this. Funnily enough, I was having this discussion tonight at training with someone that it is disappointing that we're not seeing any of the young female coaches coming through getting opportunities. I know there's a couple of coaches that I would have liked to have seen involved, and I know that probably one of them doesn't want to leave the current post because she's developed that post and developed that everything that's around her. So I wouldn't expect her to jump and leave it all behind. But on the other side of things, we are looking at, and again, to quote Lisa Martin, we want someone in post within the Scotland squad who wants to. It's their pinnacle of coaching is to coach women's Scotland women. We're not wanting this sort of conveyor belt of people using Scotland women as a stepping stone to get another coaching gig. So, but as Jonny says, we don't know. We're jumping to conclusions. I just think that as long as all the Scotland women who are involved in involved in the squad absolutely take as much knowledge from him as they possibly can about not just playing the game, but also being a professional rugby player. Then fingers crossed, fingers crossed they can. He's going to make a difference.
Yeah, I suppose that kind of question, we get learning, Jonny, about what it is to be a professional rugby player. I think we have to kind of acknowledge. I think there was a story, or certainly some of the Instagram posts from the Wallaroos this week, that the experience of being a Matt Banahan professional rugby, his experience of being a professional rugby player is going to be markedly different to the majority, if not all, women's professional rugby players. I mean, we had the Wallaroos this week posting that they were stuck in Canada, pretty much had to make their own way back, for flown economy out there to play a game, whilst the Australian men's team were flown first class out to France. The wives and girlfriends were flown out as well. And there is a disparity of treatment between men and women's in the men and women's game right now. And I think that is true in Scotland as well. And I don't, the American soccer, now the men and the women are paid equally at international level. And that has to, surely that kind of has to be a starting point with all international teams in rugby as well.
Yeah, South African cricket just did the same thing this week. Announced that they'll give their men and women equal match fees, and we've said this time and time again. You can start handing out professional contracts, and you can start shelling out money for professional coaches, but you need to have professional support and a professional environment, or you're wasting money. Like, if they're not getting the support and resources and treatment that they need to fulfill their full potential, then all the great players and all the great coaches in the world will never get over the last hump, because you cannot expect people to fly economy for 16 hours when some of them have taken time off work. And you could have Eddie Jones and Steve Hansen if you wanted them, but if you're not in the right situation, it doesn't matter how good you are. So there has got to be decent money available, not just for player contracts and for coaches, but for the resources and the support systems that they need to make it worth it. Otherwise, you're wasting your money.
John, I got to come into it on the old twitter.com this week about a couple of guys who their argument back to that was capitalism. That was all I got back. Well, it's capitalism.
Capitalism, right? Okay.
To a certain extent, I think within the
I sat on my hands through all of that.
I know. Well done. That's growth, Jonny. From the club game, right? I can see it, because as much as the kind of left wing kind of winger within me would love to say, right, every equal pay for everybody in the club game, unless everybody across the whole of the sport signs up to that, then you can't compete with French teams because you're already playing catch up from a Scotland point of view. So because there are market forces within the club game, those forces aren't to play within the international game, and I think that is one area where there can be a leveling up of facilities, of coaching, of investment. And I mean, as I made the point on Twitter, women's rugby is the fastest brand of one of the fastest growing sports in the world. It's the fastest growing brand of rugby. At this stage, women's rugby is Amazon and men's rugby is Woolworths on the high street, hoping it can stay open a little bit longer.
That's an amazing analogy, actually. Yes. So women's rugby absolutely is the growth area. Women's sport in general, as you're seeing, the Women's Football World Cup setting records right, left, and centre. The capitalism argument was based on the idea that people wouldn't turn up to watch women's sport. That has been absolutely categorically blown out the water between the football, the World Cup, the Euros last year, the Rugby World Cup, watching England selling out Twickenham, the England women's team selling out Twickenham. The interest is there, and the quality of the product is there. It's now just a case of catch up, and I think the longer that certain people fight this and are desperate to keep things just the way they are, well, you're just perpetuating exactly what people hate about rugby. This is a massive opportunity. We spoke about it last week about the women's game they're not exactly shackled with the nonsense that is the men's game and some of the traditions we have in the men's game. They've got a huge opportunity to create an amazing brand, and I think they're well on track for that. And a smart union would see the opportunity in that and then reward it accordingly and start pushing that, because this is going to be a situation where the first unions to go with this are going to be the ones that reap massive rewards from it. And England are already ahead of everyone in this, but Scotland could be doing more and should be doing more because we can make a lot of money out of this.
But the basics of capitalism in the first place, any business that you're starting, you have to invest.
Yeah.
You have to put
100%.
money into a business. And what the Red Roses have done is it took them their time, but they eventually invested in the Red Roses, and look at where they are now. And they're selling out.
Sorry, the capitalism argument would say that there wasn't a market there for that. When there clearly is, and none of us are sitting here saying that, but the capitalism argument would say there's not a market for women's sport, there's not a market for women's rugby, when there clearly is. It's just a straw man argument. It's nonsense.
It's to use a Craig phrase as well. Sorry, Craig.
No, carry on, man.
Sorry, you go, Craig. One of your phrases, what really rips my knitting about this as well is that that's all well and good as an argument, but actually, and I understand it's important for the unions to make money because that's what keeps the games going, and we do have to have money to fund the games, but the primary function of a national union is not to make money. It is to be a steward and guardian of the game. So you can't go, well, of course your union's not invested in women's rugby because that doesn't make business sense because it doesn't make money. That's not their job. Their job is to make sure that rugby is in the healthiest place it could be in. And if that means you put a bit of money into the women's game, not expecting to get any money back, well, tough. That's how running a national governing body works. You're not running Amazon.
But this is the problem, and this is God. I've been having this argument for so long nowadays. It just gets rugby clubs across Scotland, rugby clubs across Australia, rugby clubs across Ireland. They will not back their women's teams and their rugby clubs until the union backs their women's teams.
Yep.
Now, I was a little bit encouraged that now Scotland are selling season passes for the women's games, the women's Six Nations. You know, there were all of the Scotland women's games throughout the season. I've seen them coming up, and I think that's great news. That we're getting to this point where we're starting to sell tickets similarly to the men's games, so that people can go and buy, and they have access to ways of getting tickets and getting seats, etc. But it's far too slow. Far too slow. We're sitting there looking at, you know, I'm lucky enough to see Perthshire have really embraced their women's team. They work hard. They've got senior men coming from the senior men's team coming in and helping coaching, etc. To build a big team, because it's another, as I say, I've said this many times, it's another set of memberships. It's more money coming through the club. So it's just constantly frustrating. And I'm a man. I shouldn't be talking about being frustrated at women's rugby.
Yeah. I think the other point about where there isn't a market for it is that there isn't a market because no one's created a market for it. And the people, you have to put it on. You can't just say, well, no one wants to watch it on telly if it's not on the telly. You have to kind of at least test it first. And actually, what that's shown is there is an audience for it on the telly.
Yeah,
there's a very good audience for the telly. There is an audience. There, you will sell tickets to the women's rugby, and it is like the men's rugby. Is nobody's going to go and watch Scotland women get hulked every week in, week out. You need to invest to have a good product for people to want to come and see. And I think Jonny, you'd shared on one of the group chats we were in was an American guy, and first watch it's a little bit kind of, I was like, oh, all right, mate. But he makes a point saying, he was watching sport. He puts sport on for, and he's watching sport all the time, and his daughter's not that interested. But it's because he watched men's sport. He's, stick women's sport on the telly, and his daughter's interested. And I think that's what.
Yeah,
that's what
people, did he not say that? He was saying that they go and kick a football around, and he takes her swimming and he takes her to all sorts of stuff, and he saw her watching, or she saw him watching sport one day and came in and said, "Oh, do girls not play sport?" And he's like, "Well, what are you talking about? You play sport. I take you out to play sport." And she's like, "Yeah, but I never see you watching girls playing."
Yeah, and that's true. You look at the Lioness. You look at the Lionesses. I mean, it's my daughter has no interest at all in watching men play sport, but absolutely loves. We'll happily sit and watch England women play. I mean, I'm not that happy about it, but there you go. It's a different story.
To be fair, they're a very, very good team, and I thoroughly enjoyed watching them, even in the World Cup final.
Yeah, well, I'm pleased that result went that way.
Yeah.
I'm keeping my counsel on that. That's fine.
Yeah. Anyway,
we don't have to live in England.
Yeah, that is fair.
True.
Some of us are going to have to. Some of us are going to see Scotland versus England women at the Stadium of Light.
Yes.
The instructions on the tickets are very clear about keeping not being a Scotland fan in the England end. So I'm going to have to be very, very self-restrained.
The Stadium of Light is a bit of a. I mean, anyone who's been at the Stadium of Light knows fine well that that's a lie. And it's a horrible stadium. It's a dreadful place. There's no light.
Speaking of the Stadium of Light, it is one of the venues.
I'm glad you're looking forward to it, Cammy.
It's indeed, yes. It's dreadful.
Yeah, it's one of the world. I'm looking forward to going there. It's the Women's World Cup venue in 2025, which is even nice. We've got Stadium of Light. They've got York, which is that is genuinely a terrible stadium on the back of the Tesco's. That's an awful stadium in York. We've got Manchester. And some others. I'm looking at one of them. Various maps being produced. One of the maps puts Sunderland somewhere in the middle of the Scottish borders that I saw. But I mean, that's exciting. It's exciting again. So what we've got 2 years till the World Cup in England. A couple of 2, if not 3 venues very close to Scotland. So I think Scotland have to qualify because I think we were bottom of the group in the World Cup, so there will be qualification, but. Fingers crossed the way the team's playing, you would hope they'll be there. Shall we move on then? Should we talk about Georgia, the Georgia game at the weekend? We've got the Scotland team has been announced. Lots of panic, John, about it being a reasonably full strength Scotland side, but I think Gregor Townsend and others have made the reasonable point that it's a long tournament, and you've got a fair gap till we get to South Africa. You need every match fit, and resting people for a few weeks isn't going to mean they turn up match fit.
Yeah, and also, and nobody's saying this in the press, but our tournament rests in that first week and the last week. Like the games in the middle, will win those, even if we take an absolute, like, apocalyptic amount of injuries. We're still going to win those two middle games. Tonga, yeah, that'll be a stretch, but we should still win that game comfortably. Romania, it turns out, funnily enough, who predicted it? The Vern Cotter effect is not a thing. It turns out they're actually still rubbish. Who would have thought it? Like, I'm shocked. Genuinely, I'm shocked. Scottish rugby fans, yet again, I'm so pleased for you. That this isn't an impending doom that you foreseen. Right. So literally, clearly the South African. I think Townsend realizes actually Ireland. We probably can't beat Ireland because we've got it in our heads that we can't beat Ireland. South Africa is probably the game. First game of the group. Catching South Africa cold. This is the one they're targeting, and having a full strength team, match fit, ready to go, is really important for that. So I think. Like people are saying, well, what if Finn Russell gets injured? Well, the same outcome happens. We lose in the groups. Okay, cool. All right, that's a shame. We've not seen Finn Russell at the World Cup, but like we have to be ready. Like what if Finn Russell goes in undercooked? We lose in the groups. I think Townsend's been actually, and I'm a total critic of him. I think he's been quite smart here.
Maybe Romania should have taken Jason O'Halloran. Maybe they got the wrong good coach from his time in Charge of Scotland. You need to have them as a pair.
Well, they're clearly the Romanian hiring team were clearly on certain forums in Scotland and have realised that Vern Cotter is actually like, he's not even the saviour. He is like the saviour. It's just the best coach that ever. It's basically the Shawn Michaels of coaching, the best there is. Oh, that's Bret Hart. The best there is, the best there was, best there ever will be.
People forget, I think, the early parts of Vern Cotter's reign until Jason O'Halloran turned up and sorted everything out. But anyway, we digress. Good to see Ben White back, though, Craig.
Yeah, and I think it's an excellent opportunity. I think I agree with John. I think even if they said, "Oh, let's rest Finn Russell, but play the rest," well, no, we need that. We need Ben White to be playing with Finn to get him back up to speed, because he in all. We haven't, in all these games, he's not had a lot of games playing with Finn Russell outside him. So, he's played with Blair Kinghorn outside him a couple of times. And so we need him to be as switched on, because he is, I think we're pretty much set that he's going to be our starting 9 in the big games. So we need him to be there. I agree. I think, we need to just be at our absolute top level, in the highest gear we can possibly get. Any other stock phrases that you want me to use, we need to be at that level, because we need to be ready for South Africa. Because I totally agree with John. If we're going to have a good World Cup, and if we're going to have a miraculous World Cup, we've got to beat South Africa. Yeah.
The interesting thing for me, Johnny, is fullback, because you've got Ollie Smith named at 15. We haven't got Blair Kinghorn at all in the matchday squad. And then on the bench, you've got George Horn, Ben Healy, and Chris Harris, which none of those are recognised fullbacks. Darcy Graham, I think, has played there occasionally for Edinburgh. So I think if you're looking for experimentation or testing depth, that's where I think it's being tested, is what happens if we drop, when we have to shuffle things around at the back.
Yeah. Darcy played fullback against Tonga in the autumn a couple of years ago, and I was at that game, and I love Darcy as much as everybody else, and probably a little bit more, but I have no desire to ever see that happen again. I guess the other option with Harris on the bench would be that Hugh Jones goes to fullback and Harris goes to 13. So there's a couple of kind of little bits and pieces, but this is the game to test that out, because It's thin. Ben Healy is the other one. I think he's played a little bit at Munster, and obviously has an absolutely monster boot, similar to Blair Kinghorn. So there's a couple of choices, but we'd want to probably try a bit of that out on Saturday and see what the options are.
I mean, in the pack, Craig. I mean, even the pack is fairly not experimental, but it's testing the depth. I mean, you can't imagine that Batty, Cherry, and Nell are going to be the front row that goes up against the box in the first game.
Well, I don't think so. I think they're Schumann's played every game. I think so. I think he's needing a rest, to be perfectly honest. So. And they need to give Batty as much time as they possibly can. So, I'm confused. Well, no, I'm not confused. That's the wrong word. I think Dave Cherry is a dark horse in this one, because you have to think of Turner's great. Don't get me wrong. Turner is very dynamic on the pitch and also in the loose, but we are starting to question our line out is still not great. So, and that does start from hooker position. So what I would say is that Cherry, he may not be as dynamic as Turner around the field, but you do have someone who has the calmness of an older head and will be able to, and he's pretty good with his darts. So well, maybe they're testing it out. You just don't know. With Tooney, it could be anything,
It could be trying to select the sexiest 15 that he has in his squad. That's why Dave Cherry's starting.
Seriously good-looking boys in that 15, to be fair. Just putting everything aside for a second, that is a mighty good-looking 15.
It's not far off. That is not far off the best looking 15 you could select out of that current Scotland World Cup squad.
Correct, yeah. I would drop Jamie Batty for obvious reasons. Not because
would you though?
Yeah, I would.
Oh, come on, Schumann's eyes and his hair. Oh, dear.
Beautiful, right? But ultimately, me and Jamie Batty clearly don't see eye to eye, right? Because he's taller than me.
Yeah, but whose fault is that though? Because he didn't start coming at you on Twitter, did he? Let's be honest. Only one person started that, and it wasn't Wombat.
He's obviously watching my posts. That's all I'm saying, mate.
I think it's just a type. I just don't think. I think probably I'd go Batty over Schumann.
Oh,
from an aesthetics point of view.
No, I don't think
not at all. Not at all.
Big. That's big.
That's a big call.
Schumann looks like he can't grow a beard, and that's a problem.
There you go.
Sorry?
Schumann looks like he can't grow a beard, and that's a problem.
Yeah, you don't want those chiseled looks destroyed by a beard.
No, he looks like, with that big greasy hair, he looks a wee bit weird.
It smells so nice though. It's lovely.
I love Pierre Schumann as much as the next man, but he does look like a factory reject Cabbage Patch doll.
He has got
Cherry, on the other hand, I'll go with Dave Cherry is a beautiful looking human.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. With
I'm not sure about the second row. I'm going to just pull the team up.
Sam Skinner is probably the best. Sam Skinner is one of the better looking.
Well, that's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Gilchrist, no.
No,
Richie Darge Dempsey is as good as you're going to get, I think, across the back three.
Darge's got a wee bit of the squished face about him. I'm not sure about that.
It's he's got the look of a 19. He's got the look of a World War II fighter pilot, though. Rory Darge, just the look of a World War II fighter pilot.
Yeah, you can see him saluting.
That entire back row, I could see walk in slow motion towards gun turrets in a B-52 bomber.
If that back row was in season 2 of SAS Rogue Heroes, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
There you go. Obviously, White and Russell. I mean, I think that's the best looking halfbacks.
Yeah. I'd go White over Price.
Best well in the world, Healy probably looks a little bit like there's questions out about, if he's on a register.
The mustache needs to go.
That mustache
needs to go.
Awful.
But then, he's fallen the same. I wouldn't be surprised if he owns Dachshund dogs.
I think Hua Pilotos, that's inarguable. Doohan and Darcy,
Yeah.
Ollie Smith over Blair Kinghorn, I think absolutely.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Darcy needs to lose his moustache though. Darcy's moustache is just.
Darcy
Yeah,
does need to
actually,
lose that.
yeah.
I would probably take Steno over Darcy just now, just as a
Right at
like,
the moment,
'cause
yeah,
he-
until Darcy sorts his face out.
yeah. Because Steno's got an everyday man look about him. He's like, yeah, you can see where he's at. He's got a wee bit of confidence about himself because he's scoring tries for fun. I reckon Steno at the moment.
The key bit of analysis here for tonight is that Darcy and Ben Healy lose the tashes and you're in with a
Lose the
chance for
tashes.
4 of us. There's only the minor hurdle of our sexuality to overcome, but lose the tash and who knows.
Yeah, and you might be in our top 23 if something drastic happens to our sexuality.
Yeah.
You'll be on my little laminated card of who's acceptable.
Exactly. There you go. That
In the
is
right light, in the right mood, who knows, boys? That's what we'll leave it at that.
Depends how they get on it against South Africa.
Well, this is true, Craig. This is true.
This is very, very true. Look, on that note, I think we've covered everything we need to cover this week. Look, we'll be back for the main podcast next week with a review of the Georgia game, a bit more build up to the World Cup, other bits of news. Patreons, hang about because we're going to do a very special Patreon episode in a moment. We've got Banderscotch 2. I'm going to put these guys through a create your own adventure for the World Cup. We did Banderscotch 1 last time round. It was a lot of fun. Let's see if this one's as good. We'll launch it in the next couple of weeks on Twitter and on the blog. But Patreon's getting a special sneak peek tonight, and we'll also finally be talking about Bluey. Jonny and I are going to just spend a little time talking about Bluey, particularly the State of Origin episode. And John can tell us if he got through all 400 episodes on Disney Plus this week. But on that note, it is goodbye from me and goodbye from John, Craig, and Jonny.
Bye.
Bye.
Ciao.